Python code that we use a lot of in data analytics are loops. Now, there are different types of loops. We can loop through a list, we can loop through a range of values, or we can loop as long as certain conditions are met. So if we're looping through a list, then we'll have a list, for example, color equals, and then a string of multiple names of colors. And so here we're looping through this list. It's for X in color. So we're going through each color that's in that list. And here it's telling to print each one. We can loop through a range. And so for the code here, it's for X in range. And then in parentheses, you have the minimum, the starting point in your range. Then the next number is going to be up to but not included in that. So if our range is 2, 10, it's going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but stop before it gets to 10. The third number, if you have a third number in your parentheses, that is the number, the iteration. So for example, if the number is 2, it's going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, and then stop before it gets to 10. So you could have 3 numbers here. The first is the starting point. The second one is up to but not including. So Python does not include that number. So if you want to include 10 in this example, then we need that number to be more than 10. And then the third number is going to be the increments. And here we're going to be appending. That's the command that we're doing within this range. And so we're populating a list with this information. In our third example, while conditions are met, in this case, what we're doing is we start with some value of X, and we're going to be this X plus equals 3. That means it's going to keep adding to the X value 3. And so as we loop through, we just keep adding 3. So if we start at 1, for example, we add 3, we get 4, then we add 3 to that, we get 7. We add 3 to that, we get 10. Well, that's not less than 10, that is 10. So it would stop before then at the number before. So while X is less than 10, this is going to keep going through X values as long as you stay below 10. So let's take a look at how to do these in Python. And so just a reminder that you can find all of these Python workbooks at drstephpowers.github.io/BIA. And we are working through the Intro to Python in the appendix, so click on that. And of course, it'll take you into GitHub, and you can open in Google Colab. That's the button here. And then once you are in Google Colab, you will want to log in to your Google Drive and save a copy so that you can edit and amend. And as much as I try, I can't get that ring light to stop showing rings in my glasses. So I'll take my glasses off. I'm a little blind, but I'll take them off. So here we have our first looping through a list. And so we have our list, color equals red, green, blue, yellow, purple, purple. So we will run that into the system. And then you can see here our loop for X in color, color being the name of the list. And this X here can be anything. If you come from an R coding background, the popular letter is I. So you might do that. That's kind of my background. You can choose X. Coders often will make instead of using X, they'll do something like for colors in color. So it's something that's tied to it. And you can do that. You can call it whatever you want. The key here is that whatever you use here in the for, this is the label it's going to apply to each of these positions here. So then your command is going to apply to each of those. And so your command also needs to include X if X is what you have in your loop. So in this case, we're doing for X in color. So it's going through our list and it's going to print out what it finds. So you'll see here, right? It just prints out red, then green, then blue, then yellow, then purple, and then purple again. Now, very simplistic. You're probably not going to use that in your day-to-day life. You will use these loops, but this is a very, very simplistic example. In this case, you would probably just say, show me color. And there you have your list of information. So do you really need it to be listed out one at a time? Maybe if you're going to do something else to it, but probably not if you're just printing it out. All right, so let's try one that might have more Oops. I think I just, where's the undo? All right. All right, so let's try this one. I forgot to delete the example. All right, so you try this one. Create a loop to remove the punctuation from this list. All right, so we have a list here that's made up of strings, and you can see cats meow loudly has an exclamation mark. Dogs who bark are mean has a period. Oranges are sour has a question mark. So perhaps we want to clean up this text by removing the punctuation. So give this a try. Create an empty list to store the clean text, and then use the command re.sub, and then you see a bunch of letters and stuff after that as your command. So this re.sub is going to substitute in just an empty space for different punctuation. And so that's what it's telling it to do. Now it's using the package re, so we need to make sure we import that package. So take a moment and see if you can come up with what the code looks like to create a loop to remove the punctuation from this list. All right, so we add our code here. We're going to create an empty one to put it in, so you can call that whatever you want. We'll just call it W. And we're going to build our loop, and our loop is going to be formatted just like the ones before, for X in color. And here it's not going to be color, it's going to be Y, because that's the name of our list. And then we're going to need our command. So we're just going to copy that from here. And the key with this command is that this X here at the very end is what it is applying this to. So it needs to match. So if this is for X and Y, there needs to be an X here. All right, and colon for X and Y colon, and then re.sub. Now in order for this to run, of course, we're going to actually need to import the package re. So make sure you do that first. All right, for X and Y, re.sub. All right, why is it not happy? Sometimes it's unhappy when you copy things in their weird formats. So let me just see if I can get that to go. What's going on here? Here's Y, here's W. Of course, it doesn't have anything to do with it, right? So we need to put it somewhere. So the issue we have is that we need to actually do w.append, and then we'll make those changes happen there. So let's try this again. We enter in Y, we create an empty list, we've already imported our package. Now we'll do our loop, and we are then making sure that it's populating this W here with the one that doesn't have our punctuation. And so there we go. Cats meow loudly, dogs who bark are mean, oranges are sour, without our punctuation. Now we can also loop through ranges of values. So we can go from that range of, let's say, 2 to 10 in increments of 2. So we start with an empty list, and we're going to append to that empty list with these numbers that are going to go from 2 up to, but not including 10, in increments of 2. So we do that, we run it, and you can see 2, 4, 6, 8. If I want to make sure that 10 is included, then I need it to go up to, but not including 11. So if I run that. Now the key here is if I run this like this, without creating that empty Y, it just keeps appending, it just keeps adding. So make sure if you're running it again, you clean it out. And then we're going to append, and then we can put here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and now it includes 10 because that upper bound is 11. You can change it to be different. Maybe you want increments of 3. Again, empty it out. 2, 5, 8, increments of 3. Maybe you want to start with 1. And you can see there, 1, and then increments of 3. All right, so give this one a try. Create a loop to add the numbers between 3 and 10. And here's a hint, you're going to use an operator that's Y plus or equals X. We're going to give it a starting value of Y equals 0, and then loop through this Y plus or equals X. and then call the y results. All right, so give you a second to give that a try, and then we'll check. All right, so here we have y equals 0 is our starting point. We're going to do for x in range. And our range is going to go from 3 to 10. Notice there's nothing in that third position because we're not doing in increments. We're just doing 3, 4, 5, 6. Always have a colon after that. Then here we're going to do y plus or equals x. So this is going to take my y equals 0, and it's going to add to it the first value of x, which was 3. And then as we're looping through, it's going to add 4, and then 5, and then 6. So let's run that. And of course, we want to know what the results are, so show me y. And so we get 42, and we could check this. 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 5, plus 6, plus 7, plus 8, plus 9. We get 42. Notice that does not include 10. If you want to include 10 in the calculation, right, we need to make this 11. Start out empty, otherwise it's going to keep adding to 42. And then we do this, and you can see we've added the last 10 onto it. Now, we've looked at some different loops, but loops are not always needed. So, for example, let's suppose that we have our fruit colors and fruit names. And we're going to put this into a data frame or a table. So let's start by practicing that. We got to import the package pandas, and we're going to call it PD. This allows us to manipulate the data into different formats. And then we have here 2 lists. Fruit color equals green, red, yellow, blue, and fruit name, apple, apple, banana, blueberry. Okay. So obviously we have green apples, red apples, yellow bananas, blue blueberries. To combine this into a table we call fruit, we'll use a command that looks like this. So we're going to use the pandas package, so PD, and the command is data frame. It's going to build a table. And the way to take lists and turn them into a table is to do list, parentheses, zip, we're going to zip it together, and put the names of your list in the order you want them to be columns. So here we have fruit underscore name is going to go first, and then fruit underscore column is going to go next. And then we want to give the columns names. So you could use those same names as the list, fruit underscore column, fruit underscore name, or you could rename them here. So we'll just simplify. We'll call them name and color. So put columns equal and then hard brackets and then the names of your columns. When you do that, you now have a table of information that looks like this. And so often we're dealing with life in tables in data analytics and business intelligence. And so it can make it easier to see as you're working with it. Now notice that the apples in these lists are not spelled correctly. So we want to replace the names of apples with the correct spelling of apples. You don't need a loop to do this. You don't need to loop through each row of the table in order to do this correction. Instead, we can say fruit and then hard brackets, and then in parentheses is the name of the column we want it to apply to. So we're going to take the name column here, and we are going to replace anywhere it has apple with 3 P's and apple with 2 P's. And then we have in place equals true. This in place equals true means it will just replace it. If you don't have in place equals true, then what it will do is create a new variable, a new column with the new information. So we simply want to replace it. All right, I imported the pandas, I loaded my lists, I combined it into a table. We saw that table. And now I can run this replacement, and I can then output my table called fruit. And you can see it has corrected the spelling of apples without having to create a list. It's simply gone through that whole variable name and gone through each row, but we didn't have to write it as a list. So you don't, or didn't have to write it as a loop. So you don't always need to have loops. Sometimes the commands will simply apply as if they are loops. All right, one more. What loop while conditions are met? So in the example, we looked at the scenario where x while x is less than 10, we're going to keep adding 3. And we can actually even make it more complicated than that. And we can have that keep going. So I'm just going to remove this for a second here. So let's start with x equals 2. And then we run while x is less than 2, keep adding 3. Well, if you do that, then as long as the number is less than 10, it will keep adding 3. And the last number is going to be less than 10, and it's going to add 3 to it. We end up with this number here, 11. We just get the last one. So you might want to be adding more to it. You might want to say if x, and we know this symbol here, like let's go back, right, to our slides. And so we know here that when we have a percentage, it's a modulus, remainder from division. So we can actually create our loop that as long as x is less than 10, it will then add 3 to it. But if when we divide by 2, there's no remainder, so remember equals equals, means that they are the same. So when we divide x by 2, if there's no remainder, no left over, then it will stop. So then we're not just going up right up to this line, this last number, because we're getting, and then adding 3 to it, right? So this is 9, so let's run this, and then we can see where it stops. Let's start over again with our x value here. There we go. So here it stops at x equals 2. And that's not simply where x is less than 10 and then we add 3 to it. But in this case, it's where x divided by 2, where it gets to, and then it finds that there's nothing left over. So you can have additional conditions inside of your while loop, and you can tell it to stop with this command that says break. All right, try this one. Create a while loop to count down from 10. So you can create a countdown timer, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. What would this look like? So take a moment and create the code for this. So we'll start with x equals 10, and then while x is, so we could try if x is greater than 0, then we're going to do, and we can take our x. In this case, we're doing minus equals, so it's going to subtract 1 each time and go down. Okay. All right. And we can have it print out the number. So if you want to watch the countdown, then we print it out as we go. So here you can see, while x is greater than 0, we're starting with x is 10, it's going to keep subtracting 1 and print out x. So it's going to take 10, which is greater than 0, it's going to subtract 1, we get 9, and it's going to output 9. Then it's going to subtract 1, it's still greater than 0, then it's going to subtract 1, then it's going to print it out. So it keeps going until at the end, when it prints out 0, it looks at the loop and says, well, 0 is not greater than 0, and so it stops. Okay, so a bunch of different loops. We're going to be using these more as we get into our data analysis and our machine learning.